Good morning, student. In this video, I shall discuss a special phenomenon that is called polyembryony. Poly means many or more than one. Sometimes what happens in some developing ovule, more than one embryos are observed. Then how this occurs and how it is actually formed there. Now, in this case, the polyembryony, that is occurrence of more than one embryo. That means in normal cases what happens? Normally one embryo develop from one zygote. Suppose in case of normal cases, what happens? Inside the embryo sac, one egg cell is there, and after the fertilization it develops into the zygote, and from the zygote one embryo develops. So one embryo is present in one ovule. But sometimes what happens? Occurrence of more than one embryo occurs there, and this phenomenon of occurrence of more than one embryo in a developing ovule. So in one ovule, if more than one embryo develops into the seed, then it is called a polyembryony. And it was for the first time observed by Anton von Leeuwenhoek in the orange seeds. So this type of phenomenon also occurs in some other plants as well. Now this polyembryony, it may be of simple types when one ovule with one embryo sac, because inside the, suppose this is an ovule, and as we have already discussed about the structure of the ovule, inside the ovule, if one embryo sac is there, and inside the embryo sac, this is the egg cell, and this is the synergid cell, these are the antipodal cell, and this is the diploid polar nucleus. So this is the normal structure of an ovule, and if inside the ovule, so this is the ovule, and if inside this ovule only one embryo sac is there, and in this embryo sac, if more than one embryos are developing, then it is a simple type. Now sometimes what happens? The multiple type of polyembryony also observed. Here what happens? If inside the ovule more than one embryo sac is there, and if more than one embryo sac is there, then automatically if in each embryo sac one zygote will form, then more than one embryo sac means more than one embryo will be developed there. So that is why in this case also the polyembryony condition is observed. Now when it is the ovule with one embryo sac, that means it may be either in case of asexual reproduction or in case of sexual reproduction. Suppose it is an asexual reproduction, so without fusion of the gametes, then what happens here? In the gametophytic phase, suppose here in case of life cycle of the angiospermic plant, it is the gametophytic and the sporophytic phases are observed, and when it occurs in the gametophytic phase, then in the gametophytic phase there are different types of cells like your synergid cell. As we observed here, this is the synergid cells which are adjacent to the embryonic cell, egg cell. This middle cell, it is the egg cell, and on either side they are present the synergid cells. And if the embryos develop not from the egg cell but from the synergid cells, and the synergid cells, as we know that these are haploid in nature, so if from the synergid cells the new embryos are developing, then it is a case of asexual, gametophytic and synergid embryo, and it normally observed in case of argemone. And sometimes the antipodal cells which are present here, so in the opposite end of the egg cell, and these antipodal cells, these are the antipodal cells, and these antipodal cells also sometimes develop into the embryos. So that is why these are the cases of asexual and gametophytic polyembryony cases. But sometimes in the sporophytic phase, after the formation of the zygote, and sometimes what happens, the sporophytic phase is 2N or the diploid condition, and when the nucellar cells, the cells which are present in the nucellar region, if these cells develop into the embryo, the normal embryo develops from the zygote, but here the embryo, they are developing from the sporophytic tissues and the nucellar tissues, and these nucellar tissues, they develop into the more than one embryos there. Now this case occurs in case of citrus and mango. Sometimes the integumentary cell in the ovule, the nucellar region is there. In the ovule, the integumentary region is there, and some cells of the integumentary region or some cells of the nucellar region, sometimes they develop into the embryo and they will develop into the new plant. So this case is called sporophytic. This is also normally asexual, sporophytic, and they are developed from the nucellar or in the integumentary cells. Now in case of sexual reproduction, here also after the fusion of the gametes, normally the zygote, or this is called the proembryo, and this proembryo, it normally develops into or divides and redivides to develop into more than one embryo. So this embryo is called sexual and zygotic embryo. So that is why more than one embryo or many embryos develop in this way from the proembryo condition, and it occurs normally in case of orchids. Now, sometimes, some cases, the synergid cells, when they are fertilized, sometimes these 2N or diploid synergid cells also develop into the embryo. So that is why in this case also more than one embryo is observed. So this situation, which normally occurs in some of the plants, not in all, but in some of the plants, it is called the polyembryonic condition, and this type of condition is observed in some of the plants. Now, I hope this video is useful for you, and if it is useful for you, then do like it and subscribe for further videos. Thank you.